Conrad, welcome to the show. This is one I've been really excited for quite some time. Now, for those listening, Conrad is the founder of Quicks Academy, Quicks Clothing, athlete and all-round fucking savage. So, and a good friend of mine as well. And I want to jump straight in at definitely at your remit. So, why is it that men need discipline?
Yeah, Jake, thanks for having me on, man. I'm really excited to get into this myself. Strong first question. So, men need discipline. I believe men need discipline in life because if we don't have it, we just get lost. We get distracted. We get caught up in the wrong things. And this is where a lot of men fall out of, I would say, alignment and purpose. And if I'm looking at my life and the clients that we work with, we only work with men because I feel like obviously I'm only able to help men because I am one. But this is where men need that purpose in their life. They need that direction. They need that leadership, that accountability to live a fruitful life. Without the discipline aspect and the hard work and pushing for something, like I said, men just get lost.
And what in your experience, because I know that this is a huge part of what you work on and what you believe and what Quicks Academy is founded on, like what does being lost look like?
Yeah, being lost looks like just not aiming for anything, like floating through life, coasting through stuff, putting limits on yourself, on your mindset, on what you could achieve, listening to people that don't want the best for you, or listening to people that you don't want to be like, or falling into just the best word I would describe is just like a life of coasting. I talk to a lot of men every single week, and they're just coasting through life. Like there's no real urgency to go out and attack and fight for what they say they want to achieve. That's the biggest thing.
This feeling of drifting through life, being a bag in the wind. That's so interesting. And interestingly, there's an altruism that, young men without purpose are inherently, quite chaotic and actually dangerous to have around. Like societies have always, struggled to give young men a purpose, or at least strive to do that, to make sure that there's they're not a destructive force on the world. But I think something that I know you talk about often is how you get frustrated with men wasting their golden years, whether I say the golden years, that there's always going to be a golden years period available to you if you make the most of it, but actually biologically golden years. So between 20 and 30. And why do you think it is? Is it that there's lots of temptation? Is it that men fall into pleasure, or why do you think they tend to waste those years?
Yeah, I think the world we live in, there's so many distractions these days. There's so many opportunities. I would probably say there's probably far too many. You could go down so many different roads. And this is where like overconsumption on too many things, for a lot of guys, they just end up not really finding something that they love because there's always this view of, oh, this might turn out to be so much better. And I do see a pattern with a lot of guys just chopping and changing with so many things. And, when you are looking at your 20s and moving into your 30s, before you start thinking about, raising a family or having kids or getting into a serious relationship, those are the golden years where, in most cases, you only really have to worry about yourself. Obviously, everyone's going to be different. Everyone's got different responsibilities, but these are the golden years where you have to dial in and focus on, what type of man you want to become in your 30s, in your 40s, what type of father you eventually want to become and be. And it's only in those years where you don't have those responsibilities where you can actually start to carve out the foundation on what you will become, when that time does arrive. I think that's why, the 20 side of things, you got to go out and have your fun and be young and live life. But there has to be a point where that can't carry on into your 30s. And I feel like that is where most men get stuck. They're trying to hold on to too much of their youth and the fun side of life. And then they get to the position where reality starts to hit them quite hard. And it really does become really evident in your 30s, because you can see guys in their 30s completely go backwards because they haven't spent time building a solid foundation enough in their 20s. And now, everything just gets a little bit harder with kids, with more responsibilities, with less time to yourself. And this is what I've been seeing a lot over the past couple of months, especially with a lot of the clients we work with. It's that that period getting into your 30s where most men need, I would say, the most help and support.
That's so interesting. And I think it's a quite a refreshing take, actually, to hear someone talk about how actually, your 20s aren't really a free for all, because I think the general consensus is that your 20s are like that kind of open season where you fuck around completely, and then you only have to start being an adult when you're in your 20s. And obviously there's individuals, and being completely honest, this is something I've always tried to embody, is kind of the opposite in that I've always taken responsibility quite really seriously, and it's been at the core of who I wanted to become. So it's really refreshing to hear that actually, instead of, whilst having that lack of responsibility, it gives you a great opportunity to start to carve out the foundations of who you want to be, as opposed to, just having that empty buffer period before you actually have to start taking, life seriously. And it's interesting because I know a lot of your clients are, like you said, in that kind of oh shit stage of early 30s and realizing that they have to take themselves and life seriously. But it seems like your message would really, really be valuable to young men in their late teens to early 20s. Is that something you think about? The fact that young men...
Yeah, definitely. Because, that was me for a large part of my life. In my early 20s, I was, completely different to who I am now in a lot of ways, but I still was much of the same as well. My early 20s, a big part of like why I'm the way I am right now is because I had dreams of becoming a professional rugby player, and that fell out the window just due to injuries and stuff like this. And there was a period where I would say 21, 22 was definitely the hardest time of my life, because my rugby dream was over. I was working in construction, hating my job. I had headaches every day for 12 months because I had post-concussion syndrome. So I couldn't train for 12 months. I was getting, putting on weight. I was getting unhealthy. I lost my passion for life. All of my friends that I was growing up and playing rugby with, they were all picking up contracts and moving on into being professionals, where I was stuck at home, couldn't even drive a car just because of my head. I was in a bad relationship at the time. There was just all of these fucking things hitting me at this pivotal time in my life. And I didn't have, I would say I didn't have the mindset, I didn't have the structure, I didn't have the kind of support that I may have felt like I needed at the time. But it took me a long time to realize that that was my biggest blessing, right? Because I would go through much of my 20s, right up until I was about 25, just really resenting things, resenting why this has happened to me, and making bad decisions and partying and going out and not really focused on who I wanted to become. Instead, I was just pissed off and angry at why the fuck this happened to me. And I think all of these years, so from 21 to 22, right up until I would say 24, 25, were really important years for me to really learn and understand who I needed to become post rugby, post this whole identity that I created around myself. And I think, to get back to your point, right, these younger guys that, need to live life and need to have fun and need to like just do whatever they need to do. Yes, 100%. But I would say there comes a time where mid-20s, you really need to start to figure out like who you are apart from all of that fun shit. Because that fun stuff of life, of no responsibilities and not really having pressure and not really focused on something, if you stay in that period for too long, chances are by the time you're 30, you're going to be fucked, or later, because you haven't been able to flick the switch and focus on who you need to evolve into next. And I think that was a big phase of my life. And yeah, like I said, all of that shit in my life was such a huge blessing. But the thing is, you don't see it at that time as a blessing. You see it as such a fucking terrible thing. But this is where I believe the biggest thing that I'm about, and a big strength of mine, or I would often say a gift, is I'm able to turn pain into purpose a lot of the time. And I've done that throughout my whole life. I do it with clients as well. And all I'm doing is looking back at my life and seeing all of the shit things that I've been in and managed to turn it into something that gives me my purpose.
And how do you go about turning that pain into purpose? Because that was one thing I really wanted to speak about, because I find that statement in itself so highly impactful and agentic, because it allows you to turn the thing which is undermining your ability, yourself, and turn it into something that is a propellant. So how do we actually go about turning pain into purpose?
Yeah, man, it's a good question. So I think ultimately it always comes down to, number one, accountability. It really does. And it comes down to accepting things for truly what they are, because that's the first step on overcoming that pain. You can never overcome a shitty situation or a painful event or something that's just, been fucking dragging you down if you're not first willing to just accept it. Right. And this was a struggle that I had for a long time. I couldn't accept a lot of things that happened growing up in my family. I grew up with a lot of chaos. So my family, we would fight a lot. We were separated a lot. So I didn't really have a close kind of family. So that really affected me for a lot of my years, because I felt like I didn't have that. But I would carry around this pain far too long, and that wasn't allowing me to actually move past it and accept it. Similarly to my rugby dream getting cut short, and I couldn't play, and I had to work in construction, hate my life. I had to go through a process of actually just accepting this for what it is, instead of carrying around this baggage of weights that was just draining me for so long. So once you accept this pain, or you accept this event, or you accept whatever the fuck it is that you have been through or gone through, that's the first step that you're able to start to focus now on, okay, what can I gain from this, and where can I go from this, and how can I come back stronger from this? And you've got to understand one thing about pain. Like, I always believe that people that have gone through very painful shit in life, they have an even bigger purpose, because they've been able to go through the flames. They've been able to go through just shitty times. And it's in those shitty times where your character is built, your discipline is built, your mindset is built, because you know that, hell, if I can make it through this, what else can I make it through? And you start to build a quiet confidence if you didn't already have it. For me, I didn't have much confidence. And I'll be honest right now, just in case you edit the start of this call out. I shat myself because the nerves got to me. I haven't really been a very confident person much of my life, and this is something that I always need to work on. But going through my painful experiences, and first off accepting it, taking full ownership and accountability, so that gives me the power, because I'm not blaming anyone else. I'm blaming myself now. It's all on me. When you give yourself that power, you're able to turn that into action. Okay. So most people, when they go through painful shit, they just blame everyone. It's everyone else's fault. I was the same. But you've got to really flip that, because once you give yourself the accountability, you give yourself that power, right? And you turn that power into action. And for me, I was in a position where I was broke as fuck. I had no money. I couldn't move back home because we didn't have a family house. My dream was gone. I was working in construction, just all this shit. But I had to figure out what the fuck I was going to do, because it was like, who else was going to do it? So it's like taking that extreme ownership was, I would say, the first step in a true passion for personal development for me. And when you start to take extreme ownership on everything that happens in your life, like I said, you're able to take it into action. When you start acting on things, this is where like the ball starts rolling, because you're no longer looking or worrying about all of this shit. You're actually actively working on, okay, how the fuck do I move on from here? I don't want to revisit this painful place ever again. And you kind of make it your duty if you really come to terms with that, because no matter what painful experience you're going through, right? If it's a breakup, if it's a divorce, if it's a lost job, career, whatever it is, if you're actively working so hard to make sure you never fall back into that situation again, it's almost guaranteed that you're never going to revisit that painful place. And that's where you start turning that pain into purpose, because it only comes from acting out of that kind of painful event.
And if anyone listening is in any doubt whatsoever as to what to do, I think honestly that what you've just said has impacted me immediately. And I think I have such a respect for, firstly, your honesty, and secondly, the depth in which you were able to explain that and articulate that, because that 2-3 minutes is the difference between someone, going off the edge and crumbling and completely making something of their life and having such wider impact that it's impossible to even dream of that from where they currently sat. So I thank you. And something that came to mind is that, they say that adversity introduces a man to himself. And that's immediately what I thought when you were like explaining just there. And there's a reason why it's called make or break, because ultimately these nexus events in your life where you're either going to fall to pieces or, strengthen and understand where you really are or who you really are. That's the foundation in which you're built upon, but incredibly powerful. And I think it's interesting because when we're talking about rebuilding who you are, that's something that I didn't actually realize we have in common, in terms of there's this whole chunk of who you believe you are that all of a sudden gets just amputated. Like for me, it was the army, and for you, it was being a professional rugby player. And rebuilding who you are with this void, things very easily fall into it, very easily, and it's really tough to be able to kind of undo that or fill it up with something else that is so powerful it displaces whatever fell into that void. So I just understand how difficult that is, and I think that it makes so much sense as to why you are so vocal and believe so strongly what what you're about.
Yeah.
So I love that. And you mentioned being in a negative relationship earlier on, and I know that the relationship you have now is incredibly admirable. And I just want to understand, like, was it intentional for you to become the kind of man, and how did you go about becoming the kind of man that could be with a woman who you can build the rest of your life with? Because I know that is a struggle for so many men that I speak to, that you speak to.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Because I feel like, again, for me, I honestly feel like for me, my whole life is trying to turn my pain into how I want my life to be. And I know growing up, so my family split up when I was in grade 4 or 5. So maybe I was like 10 years old. but like, yeah, painful trauma with a lot of stuff that carried on from that. And like for me, my number one goal in life is to finally have and build a loving fucking family. Like that for me is goal number one. Um, but obviously, how do you get that goal, right? First, you've got to become the type of guy that can actually even make that happen. And I think with me and Tegan, she is 100% my soulmate. We went to school together. I've known her for 15 years. So we met when we were 15 years old. But I don't know, man. I think I'm just extremely blessed just to even meet her and have her in my life. Like I truly am. Because I just feel like she is and has always been a person that's always understood me clearly, especially in my younger days when, I would carry around this weight and I wasn't, I was nowhere near the guy I am now. She was still a great friend and like we just have such a strong connection. So I feel like, yeah, for me, I don't know if it's like just luck or I've been blessed with it or if it's just like destined, possibly because of the fact that I want to build this strong family. It's my number one goal because of my upbringing that I didn't really have that.
Hmm.
I don't know, but yeah, I think mine and Tegan's relationship is amazing because we're both building a life together. She works in the business with myself, so that is a true blessing as well because we both share the highs, we both share the lows. We can both pick each other up when things are down. We can both understand what we're both going through, and I think for me that's a perfect recipe because we both understand what we are working towards, what we're trying to build for our future, for our life, for our kids one day when we have them. And I think for that reason, it's like gives us extra strength together. I know that that's not the case for a lot of relationships out there, um, where you're not both working on the same thing, and everyone's different as well. That's the other thing. I think relationships they can be difficult because everyone's different.
Yeah.
So I don't like to give too much relationship advice because, hey, I'm not perfect. I'm far from it. I try my best. And at the end of the day, like, when you love someone, you've got to do everything possible to truly love them forever. And that's one thing with me. Like I'm an incredibly loyal person. And, I think that at the end is it. Like when you commit to someone, you've got to commit. There's no fucking around. There's no bullshit. That's your person, and that's how I view my relationship with Tegan.
I think you've actually hit straight to the core of it in that you are building a life together. And this is something that I often discuss with people because, you know, I didn't realize you'd known each other so long. And I think that's really cool. But Ailish and I have been together over 7 years now. And it's just the only thing I can ever really distill it down to is exactly what you've just said in that, you know, you are, there comes a point where you start building everything as one and it becomes whatever life throws at you, it's how do we overcome this?
Uh,
As opposed to, you know, having any kind of separated sense of self with regards to overcoming these challenges. And, you know, whenever there is individual struggle, it's how do we, you know, as a partner, how can you support them or how can they support you? And in terms of who you need to be in order to have that, it's having the humility to understand that you are always going to be striving to be the best version of yourself for them. I think, although I think you summarized it perfectly.
yeah, I
And
think yeah, and I think like when you are building something together, um, there's obviously so many positives, but there's positives and negatives with everything. But there's definitely tough days and tough lows, especially with business. So I think in that extreme scenario where you're both going through a low together, but you both love each other and you both are working for something together, this is a perfect opportunity where your relationship actually gets tested, because you've got to communicate clearly, because it's not a business relationship. It's a your love.
Yeah.
And there's been a lot of testing times, like with some stress and stuff like that. And this is helping us work even harder on how we communicate. Because if we're not able to communicate at like the hardest or the lowest or the high stressful times, because we're both trying to build what we're working towards, then obviously it's just it's going to become more and more testing and more tough. So we've found this to be an incredible strength, because I see it like your training. If you can't hit your, I don't know, peak sessions at the highest stressful times, then you're going to break. And it's same for me and Teagues. If we can't communicate clear enough and lead on her end and my end clear enough, then our goals that we're trying to build together, they're most likely going to not happen. So that's something that um, I think is important to note if you are building something together with your other half.
Yeah, and I couldn't agree more. I couldn't agree more, because I know that we're in very similar boats. And by the way, to give you a look behind the curtain, like Tiggs and Conrad have a wonderful relationship. They're a wonderful couple to spend time around. And I think it's interesting because you know how we were talking about make or break earlier. Obviously, communications at the foundation of any long term enjoyable relationship. But because you're in that pressure cooker where you're introducing external stress, it really does make or break, because it forces you into these situations which normally only ever happen, you know, hopefully over a handful of times over the whole course of your life. You'll probably have a few moments in a year like that, when you're in business together as well. I know for me personally, 3 of my lowest points I've ever experienced in my whole life have come off the back of, you know, something revolving around business. And our ability to communicate through that is really one of the reasons I was able to push through that.
Yeah.
So I completely understand. I want to. We've touched on the business side of things a little bit, and I think it's criminal not to talk about fitness and business, given your position within both. But what is so you own and have founded a brand called Quicks, which for those watching, I wanted to rep this morning. It's literally phenomenal. Like this has no real affiliation other than I just fucking love the products. The running shorts, for example, are by far the best I've ever experienced, and I've used a lot of them. But the slogan of the brand is "Here to Win," and I just want to understand where that came from.
Yeah.
How that came to be.
Yeah, man. Here to Win came from ultimately looking back at my life when I got myself to a point of how the fuck did I get here kind of thing. So I've always loved fashion and clothing. I obviously love training, fitness, and I want to build a real impact in the fitness industry, not just with the coaching, but with the clothing as well, and personal development as well. Like they're my biggest passions. So when I'm thinking about a brand that actually stands for something, it represents something that can inspire people to want to wear it, to want to represent it. Here to Win is what Quicks is about, because for me, if I'm looking back on my life, when I got myself to a point of, trying to push for more, I would look back and just think, how the fuck did I get here? What happened? What did I do? And ultimately, all I could come down to was I've always had this incredible amount of self-belief, internal self-belief. I've always struggled with parts of confidence and stuff like this, and this is part of me still breaking that down. But like I've always had a huge amount of self-belief with what I can achieve in my life, and then I'm here for more. I'm here to make an impact, and like it comes back to me getting through some of these tough times in my life and some of these challenges, and all I was doing was turning inward and just believing in myself that I could get out and I could make something and I could progress from here. So it's kind of like turning that pain into purpose again, but being here to win for our brand, it's a brand that represents, you're not just here to win a marathon race or your training or whatever it is. It ultimately represents you're here to win whatever you're going through, whatever setback, whatever fear, whatever doubt you have, especially like the mental barriers that people set on themselves. I just really want to create a brand that can fall in love with that ethos, because ultimately, if you believe that you are here to win, no matter what you're going through, and you spend every single day just believing in that and harnessing that, either through your training, through whatever it is that's going to help you get through that, you're going to win. Like it's a guaranteed. And I feel like that's just been a huge part of my life. And that's why I wanted to build the brand that represents part of that.
Yeah. And I think what's really impressive is the most immediate kind of comparable, I guess, would be, you associate Nike with Just Do It, and or Nike, however you say it. And I've never experienced and never witnessed such a cult following of a brand so new. But even in Dubai at the gym I train at, I see at least a Here to Win shirt, pretty much every week, at least once. And I think it's because exactly what you just said. It really represents something. It represents an ideal that you can strive to, as opposed to just looking cool or just being really good quality performance wear. I'm really genuinely curious about the transition, or at least not the transition, but what the differences were between starting a fitness business, where it's a service, to a physical product business. Because I think the general consensus that restaurants and clothing companies are the two hardest to kind of get going,
Oh shit, yeah. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, look, it's obviously infant stages. So we've had 2 drops. The biggest step that we're taking now with our brand direction is making sure that we are able to do a lot more impact within our community, our clientele, and add in a lot more of the storytelling that makes us who we are. Because I think that is hugely important if we're going to be successful, and if we're going to stay on track with, why we wanted to build this brand in the first place and not divert into different areas. And I feel like, obviously starting a clothing brand, there's a lot of investment and capital that, you've got to invest in, and you probably don't reap it back for months, years, who knows? But for me, it's not about that. It's about actually creating a brand that I love and that people love and that can actually have a huge impact. And the next phase of the storytelling and the emotional side of things to pull out who we are as a brand, I think is where we're heading into next, just because this is what is going to try and tell what I've just explained here, like get, customers involved in and around the brand so they can see we're clearly just not, like another fitness brand just trying to sell stuff, because that's not what it's about. But with clothing, everything just, it takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of patience, investments, a lot of planning. And yeah, trying to do that as well as the coaching side of things. I'll be honest, I probably took off way too much that I could chew. And I learned a lot last year, to be honest, trying to do both. And yeah, I've been posting a lot, well, not a lot, but I've shared it quite a bit on socials, with 2025 just being such a busy, crazy, chaotic year. And that's just because I was trying to do too many things. Yeah.
I think it's an important lesson there to kind of plan out your periods of like push, and also account for, because I know for a fact whenever you launch something, I experienced it myself, but it's always going to take so much longer than you anticipate, and there's always going to be so much more work involved than you anticipate. But again, I think we both share a common ethos of seeking out hard things because they're hard, and ultimately that's how you know that you're progressing, how you're becoming the version of yourself who you want to be, is by continually embracing these challenges. But I was just genuinely really curious because it's
Yeah.
such a big undertaking. And I really do just appreciate how much the brand stands for something. And genuinely, it's not often that it does. I can
Mm.
only think of a handful of examples where a company actually represents something more than just, most people try and sell the features as opposed to the identity, but it really is an identity-based product with, obviously really good technical specs. But
Yeah.
I was curious. So I think one thing that you're really well known for is obviously having a fucking dialed physique year round, and really, taking that hybrid ethos and running with it, of constantly improving your lifting figures and your running figures. I had a good friend on the podcast earlier last year, who's a hybrid coach as well, and I just want to talk a bit more about your fitness journey, and going
Mm.
from that place of being in construction and not being able to train, how you started to get into training again, and
Yeah.
just physically, the physical side of things, how you got to this point.
Yeah, man. So rugby was everything to me. I started running when I was 15. So I grew up in Cairns, which is quite a small town in Queensland. And I started playing rugby when I was 14. Was quite good. It was a small town, so I was making rep teams and stuff like that. But my stepdad really got me into doing extras and training more and training harder. He would send me on 3 5K runs after school, 3 times a week. And I was quite a chubby kid as well. I was quite chubby. So I was going on these runs, hated every single one of them. Man, they were fucking hard. But I noticed my physique started to change, and how I would play. I was so much fitter, so much stronger, so much faster than a lot of the kids I was playing with. I got a rugby scholarship down to a private school in Brisbane, and that's where I really, probably the best thing that ever happened to me, to be honest. Because I went to a school with extreme discipline, extreme high standards, and I relished that because I was coming from a household with none of that, to be honest. So this was a big step in my just natural progression and wanting more and wanting to achieve more. Um, but I really just put all my eggs in one basket, which was rugby. And I made some pretty high rep teams coming through 20s and stuff like that. And then, that's where I would say the hybrid style of training has always come from, being strong, uh, you know, being able to, lift and run. And that's just a natural rugby kind of training standard. But what are we coming up to, like 20 years old, 21, 22, you really do have a small opportunity to try and play professional. And obviously that um, fell down because of multiple injuries, and I really had to give it up. Otherwise, I was just not going anywhere. So this pivotal time in my life, 21, 22, I had 12 months off everything because I couldn't train. I couldn't do anything. Even like you see the glare in my office today, even the sun glare would give me extreme headache. So this year was the toughest year of my life. My headaches didn't go away for 12 months. After that, I actually started to get back into training, and I was 22. I still loved rugby. I still wanted to play. So I actually went for another crack. And this is how I knew I had to give it up, because I loved the contact. I loved the competitiveness of rugby and how hard it was. And we had a few trial games, and I was just so scared to hit my head. I couldn't tackle properly. And when I knew that, I knew it was time to give it up. And I had to figure out, okay, what the fuck do I do now? And honestly, running really helped clear my head, helped clear my thoughts, helped release a lot of this frustration and tension that I was trying to work through, because I had to figure out what the fuck was going on. And then yeah, I just started getting into long distance running more and more. I think my first goal at this time was like just to tick off a 10K run. I still remember how like huge that was for me. And then I just got obsessed. I just got obsessed with an understanding on, okay, my whole life up until this point has only been training for rugby. Now I don't have that. Like I can fucking train how I want to train. This is amazing. And I really took that as a completely like new book. Like what can I do now? How can I train now? And I started ultimately like, yeah, instead of just always focusing on rugby, now it was focused on, okay, where can I push my body to with my physique, my running, and it kind of just went from there. And then up until now, I love marathons. I love, yeah, the I would say the endurance side of long distance marathon events. It's a grueling prep. It's tough. You've got to be extremely dialed and disciplined. It takes a lot out of you as well, so you have to really focus. But I also love bodybuilding, and I love lifting weights. I love lifting heavy. I love getting jacked. I love looking strong. So I just try and balance the two and try and be the best that I can be at both things. But running for me is definitely number one, because I think in those early days, it really helped me like find myself, I would say, because man, a lot of my best ideas and thoughts and just shit has come from early morning runs by myself. And I think that's why I love running so much, because it actually has helped me develop personally so much in some weird way.
That time alone with your thoughts, I think, is invaluable. And especially in today's world where, as we've already mentioned, there's distractions, there's fucking noise everywhere. It really, running presents a really unique opportunity, because if you're pushing it towards the top end, everything shuts off. You become a heartbeat in your head, and it's your internal monologue, and that's it, shouting through the kind of pain. And when you stretch into long distance, there's a I know exactly what you mean. There's a quiet calm that comes with that, and especially, even if you do have music on, but especially when you run without music.
Yeah,
I often say it's quite tongue in cheek, but if you can't afford a therapist, just start training for a marathon,
yeah,
because I think it's so rare that we give ourselves that time where we are physically occupied and our mind is free to wander. It kind of recreates that shower thought moment, because
yeah,
you're kind of doing something else, but not mentally taxing, so it can tick over and process things in the background. But I completely get that, and again, it's really interesting because I've experienced that kind of crisis of who you are when you put so much stock in your physical capability as to who you are, and when
mm,
that rug's pulled out from under you, um, you have this moment of, well, if I'm not physically capable, then who am I?
yeah,
So I really, really get that, and it seems like I want to talk about more about confidence. I know that we've mentioned it, but you
mm,
know, it seems like the real bedrock of your confidence is in your physicality and in your physique, and that's enabled you to then take the leap to things that for you were harder to attain, in like your ability, in the way in which you do things. Can you talk
yeah.
a bit more about that? Is that right? Would that be right to
Yeah.
say?
Yeah, man, absolutely. So, like, the confidence for me, like, I suck at public speaking. Like I mentioned before the start of this call, I was fucking nervous and shit. It's just something that I've always struggled with. Even at Mark Holz's event last year when I was on stage, man, I was fucking shitting myself. Um, and I think it just stems from not having enough opportunities when I was younger to actually voice myself and like have that support to like unpack certain things that I was either going through or holding in. But as I see it now is, for some reason, right? You mentioned I was in a bit of a flow state articulating the message earlier. For some reason, I have a real amazing ability of being able to explain certain things that I fucking genuinely love and am passionate about. Whereas other things I just don't. And I see this all the time in my coaching when I'm on a call with a client struggling with some things. I just know exactly what to say. I don't know if it's been built subconsciously because I have held things down much of my childhood, and that in one way didn't allow me to have the confidence to speak up in those times, but it allowed me to suppress and internalize a lot of things clearer. I think maybe that's one thing that's happened. That's something that I'm really noticing maybe in the last couple of years. But again, internalizing all of that stuff, I had to feel confident somehow. And that is where the rugby helps me. That's what I created my identity around because, I loved being a good team man and being a good friend and playing really good footy and improving. And I think I attached so much on that part being my confidence and showing my confidence in my physique and my ability. And now it's like, okay, how can I continue working on building my confidence in these other areas that I'm not so confident in? And this is doing stuff like this. Like I posted in our community group chat. This is my 4th podcast. My first 2 were like I was shitting myself, man. I really was.
Yeah.
I was. But it's so important that I do these things because I know that I have so much within me, and I know I have so much to share that I have just fucking kept down. And I know that if I keep living in the corner of my head with this imaginary fear or whatever, I'm not going to grow. I'm not going to progress. And for me, I'm like obsessed with growing. I'm obsessed with progression. And I posted in our community group chat this morning about it because this is where a lot of men get stuck. I was stuck there because a lot of guys aren't willing to pay the price of being embarrassed or failing or looking like an idiot or saying something stupid, or just not many guys are willing to pay that price. But that is the price you have to pay if you're going to improve on an area that has once held you back.
Austin Butler has a quote, or at least he is where I heard the quote from, that, there's a whole other world on the other side of embarrassment. Go out and make a fool of yourself. And I think, maybe not in that exact context, but I know exactly what you mean. Yeah. In that once you realize that, I think you need to repeatedly show yourself that although you may be embarrassed or, feel a bit cringe at the time, that's kind of the entry toll to being able to realize that it's not going to fucking kill you. And that there's this whole other world of stuff that you can go off and explore that makes you a better version of you. But coming back to, our inner dialogue, our inner language, the language you use with ourselves doesn't describe reality, it creates it. And I know that historically you've only had evidence to say that you're not good at public speaking and things like that, but you believe up there. You belong up there, brother. Like, I know that, I think last year's event, Mark Coles's event, I remember, and, just continuously throughout time, I think more people deserve to hear your thoughts and your experience, because it has impact. That's exactly why I wanted to speak to you today. And that's one of the reasons I fucking love having a podcast, is because I get to speak to people I genuinely, with, full chestedly admire. And I feel like they can bring bigger impact to the world. And that's the mission of this podcast. Like, this is what it's for. Ultimately, it's called Made for More because I believe, funnily enough, that everyone is made for more than than their circumstance, than their environment, than the people around them say, than they believe themselves. But there's a I think there's real value in pursuing things that require courage. Things that make you uncomfortable, things that make you scared, because obviously that's where courage is built. But no, I do you, sorry, I do you believe that for most men, focusing on training and their physicality is actually the lowest hanging fruit to develop confidence?
Oh, I think it depends on the type of person and what they are struggling with. I'll look at it in my respect. For me, back let's go back years ago. You could never get me on a stage and speak,
Yeah.
right? But I think with time, what training does is it helps you break down that fear a little bit more. It helps you every single day when you're getting up and you're doing what you said you were going to do, and you tick off your boxes every day, every week, every month. You slowly start to build an internal confidence and an internal ability to kind of overwrite maybe some of the fears or the doubts that are in the mind. So I think that helps get you to that place much quicker, because it all has to come from within. If inside you're not fucking aligned or you're not aware of things, you're never gonna like change your external reality. So it has to come from inside. And I think that's what training is so important for, because unless you just, yeah, I don't know. I think it is different for everyone. For me, it was the training side of things, because that was just the closest way that I could feel confident and comfortable to then go to that next step.
Hmm.
Yeah.
And I understand, because obviously, if you look at your childhood, you did have a basis. Your known competency, where you had historically felt like you succeeded, was in a physical pursuit. And you see this with a lot of athletes, or a lot of people, sorry, that were athletes as kids. I know that in our industry, I'd imagine that you've spoken to a lot of men who, maybe used to play, rugby or footy to a high level, or maybe I think it happens with swimmers a lot,
Mm.
and they, for whatever reason, drop out of it. A lot of the time it's injury, or, maybe they just got cut from like, ruthless squad picks and stuff like that. And then they give it up cold turkey. And then they actually come back to years later, when they feel lost, wanting to just reactivate some kind of physical
Yeah.
drive again, because that's their reference point for
Yeah.
what they can be good at, and that's what I definitely,
Yeah.
see in your journey, and it's one that I felt myself.
Mm.
But I can understand how, depending on who you are, maybe your basis for some level of competency was in actually how good you were at school, or maybe good you were at maths, or
Yeah.
how you're really good at drawing, or something like that. And I was going to ask, like, if someone, say, at rock bottom, like we've been, in the past, and they're looking for, let's say it's a man, because obviously that's your area of expertise, but they're listening to this, they're at rock bottom, what do you recommend is the first step that they can take to start moving away from that and
Mm.
becoming something close to where you are now?
Yeah. Always the first step is accepting exactly where you're at. Like everything comes from acceptance, because like without that, you're not able to move on. You think you're moving on, but you're still carrying around this resentment. You're still carrying around the blame. You're still carrying around all of this shit that isn't actually helping you. It's putting you further and further behind, or just keeping you stuck. So when you accept, it puts you straight into the accountability aspect that you need, because if you are at rock bottom, you've got to be accountable for that, right? Because ultimately there were some decisions that happened, or whatever it was that got you there. But that does not mean that you stay there. That does not mean that you have to stay there. So when you accept, you take that accountability. That means you are now giving yourself the power. And when you give yourself the power, you internally get this confidence, because when you can flick your mindset towards, okay, this is my fault, but I'm not fucking staying here any longer, that's a whole nother trajectory that you're going on. Whereas if you stay stuck because you can't accept and you're blaming everyone else, that's going this way. So that is number one. And when you give yourself that power, it puts your energy in motion. It puts your focus in motion. It pretty much puts you in line with what you say you want to go out and achieve. Now, the hardest part is obviously, where is the rock bottom? Everyone's rock bottom is completely different. And everyone's mindsets are completely different. Some can handle a certain amount of pressure, stress, and pain. Some cannot. But this just means you've just got to put more time span on what you're trying to achieve. And I think this is part of the other problem. Um, people try and compare their lives to other people or compare their situation to other situations. They feel like they should be so much further ahead than this guy, but none of that fucking matters. It's only your life that matters. It's only you right now that truly matters. And I feel like when you start giving yourself all of this energy, because that's all it is, you're just giving yourself this power, you're giving yourself this energy to move out of this situation. Because again, if you're comparing yourself to someone else, that energy is going to him, not you. And I think you just got to build up all of these internal energy. I call it energy, but really it's just taking extreme fucking accountability, ownership, and just giving yourself like this. Yeah, it is energy to move out of that situation. And then you're not thinking about, okay, I got to get out of rock bottom and I've got to make $1 million this year. It's no, I've just got to get out of rock bottom and wake up fucking happy because I'm out of there. That's it.
Yeah. And I think the way that I like to visualize this and the way you explained it there, what came to mind is before you take accountability, you could be dragging around these sandbags that are tied to your ankle and you don't want them to be there, but you're ignoring them, you're burying your head in the sand, so they stay there, and eventually they build up and you're dragging around this fucking, great big pile, and they're catching all kinds of shit, like they're filthy from the floor. And I think paradoxically, it seems like the way to get rid of that would to be, to sever those ties, but actually you picking those up and carrying them on your shoulder, it's only at that point you've got them in your hands and you can decide to let them go and then carry on with your life. That's how I envisage that. I like having a kind of visual reference to come back to, but that, that's what it sounds like. I think that's incredibly powerful and should give anyone a lot of hope. Sorry.
Yeah. No, that's a good visual representation. Another one which I explained to a client to just the other week is, picture you walking up a mountain with these sandbags, right? And this client, he would walk up halfway and doubts would creep in, meaning he would get tired and he would walk back to the starting position every time. Either a doubt, a challenge that was a little bit too much for him to push through. I explained it to him, you're getting up halfway and you're still resorting back to your starting position, your old self. It's not until you get up halfway, you drop the fucking bags, then you get to the top, and at the top of the mountain, he's seeing a completely new view that he's never been able to see before. And it's only like through that representation, I think is important, because the climb is always going to be very fucking difficult and you're always going to have all of these challenges, but you've got to always be letting go of things. And letting go of, letting go is a process that men will go through multiple times in their life. And I think if you can look at it like that, there's always another peak where you're always going to see a completely new world that you've never been able to see before. But you're only going to get there when you let go of shit that is just holding you back.
There's a humility and a maturity to that as well. I know from experience, there's certain things that you have to take responsibility for, whether you like it or not. And exactly like you say, in order to be able to let it go, you need to have that, understanding that actually you're at the root of the problem. Because if someone needs to hear this logically, how could you not be at the root of something you're experiencing? Because our experience is entirely dictated from our perspective. So anything that we feel or see, it's because we are experiencing that as a byproduct of generating that reality, if that makes sense. We consume all this information, like even, the light so that I can see this computer, etc. So if there's no one outside of you that can change that, because your frame of reference comes from in here. But no, I absolutely adore that. And I think for someone who is so vocal, so purpose driven, and obviously what you do is exactly what we've been talking about, helping lead other men to the point where, and give them an idea that this change can happen. You lead others in, into your footsteps of where you've already been, to take accountability, to move on from out under this weight and to climb that mountain. So as someone that teaches others this year, coming into the rest of 2026, how are you challenging yourself? How are you working to personally develop, and like what kind of things, what does that look like, I guess?
Yeah. Great question, man. Honestly, it is letting go of things even now. Like so much of me up until this point has been, like I want to help everyone. I really do. I want to help everyone, even if they fucking don't want it sometimes. I'm like, no, you just don't see what I see. Like I want to help you. But I understand now, especially with where everything's at, I can't afford to continually waste a lot of my energy and a lot of my mental bandwidth and clarity on men that don't want help, that actually don't want the help, because there are a lot of guys that just don't want it. You can't help some of these guys. Whereas the past few years, I would do everything in my power and almost bend over fucking backwards because internally I just want to help these guys that are struggling so much. But now, if I'm looking at 2026 and the ascension that I want myself and my team to go to, I cannot have so much of that time, so much of that energy just being wasted, because it takes away from my responsibilities, leading myself and my team, my relationship, all the clients that truly do want to win. And I'm just at a point where I need to focus on the winners, the guys that truly do want to win this life. So that's something that only recently I'm learning to let go of, because ultimately that is a big part of who I am. Like I naturally always just want to help people. That's maybe just like my first probably natural leadership quality that I've always had, because I understand in childhood, just through the struggles that I've had to go through. I hate seeing people struggle and shit like that. But that for me is one aspect that I need to work on, because that's going to further develop myself, the team, and also, yeah, just where we want to go this year. Always training goals. I set huge, big training goals every single year. And I set goals that are a little out of reach, to be honest, because I want that every single year. And I actually want to find my limit every single year. And last year I felt like I definitely found my limit. Trying to start a clothing brand, trying to lead, scale, and manage a team, trying to do so many things, marathons, all like at one time with so many fucking things just going on. I definitely found my limit, but for me, it's like getting to that limit and then I do a big review, because I set a goal for a sub 3 hour marathon in Sydney and I failed it. But it was the best thing for me, because I reviewed that intensely and I reviewed, okay, what happened? Why did this happen? Why did I not hit it? And I would find all of these excuses that I kept making, like as little as they were. At the time living in Bali, running around in Bali is terrible, right? There's potholes, there's dogs that chase you, there's all this type of shit. And I would make the excuse, it just sucks running here in Bali. However, there's marathon Olympic champions running on dirt tracks in Kenya. Do you know what I mean? So like I put that into perspective and I start to realize there's so many excuses that I'm still making. And this is why, you build that up over time. This is why you don't hit the goal. This is ultimately why things fall apart. But a lot of people look at these failures and get down on it. Like that for me, missing that sub 3 goal in Sydney was the best thing for me, because it made me understand, who I can't be this year, what excuses I can't make this year, what I need to focus on this year. So that's why I'll set big crazy goals that are a little bit out of reach, because I'm either going to tick it off, which I'm being fucking super happy, or I'm going to miss and I'm going to be able to do an incredible deep dive that's going to give me the information I need to carry on into next year with more progress and more like opportunities of growth.
You learn more from your failures than you do your wins.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And it will always hold a mirror up to where you can improve. And I think the relationship with failure that most people have is not self-serving. It's actually detrimental in that, like, so many people are terrified of failure. And this might be a trope of, self-improvement or business nowadays, but I still encounter it so regularly where people are dismayed when they fail, and those moments where you feel like a failure is really where you get to just look in the mirror and understand that's exactly to the decimal point where I'm lacking. Great, I can now work from there. And I feel like, obviously, physically is a fantastic place to discover that, because I think there's some magic in physical work, because ultimately, in the pursuit of physical work, your body, your brain, the physical aspect of your body is fueling the mental. Like, training makes you feel better, which helps you be better, and then it's a self fueling cycle. So I definitely understand that. I think it's really important and admirable to hear that from you, in that at this developed stage that you're at now, after all of this, and preaching exactly what you preach, that it's important to still seek out and, like, actually try and push so hard that you find that limit every single year, because that's the only way that you're going to be able to address where you're not strong enough yet, and continue to grow. It's really interesting. And as someone who values growth so much, you said you're addicted to it. What sources of inspiration or growth, or kind of, I suppose, information? Like, where do you get them from?
So I listen to a lot of YouTubes, just like YouTubes back in the day, like Napoleon Hill and all of those types. That personal development, really early on stuff, I just resonate with so well with all of that stuff. And every single morning I'll sit at my balcony and I'll just listen to either YouTube clips of big dog CEO businessmen doing interviews. And in the afternoon, in the morning I'll do that, and in the afternoon I will as well. Just because I want to, especially this year, I've set a goal. I want to consume content from these guys that I eventually want to be like. And if I'm listening to even just snippets of interviews, conversations, podcasts, I'm going to pick something up. Something's going to click on and catch on after a year of doing it. And I found myself, like, just with a poor habit where in the morning before work or some free time, I would scroll Instagram, I would scroll Reels, or just not do productive shit. Same as in the afternoon. And I want to replace just some of those habits with things that are actually going to be moving me forward. And I mean, there's an endless supply of killers out there. You're one of them, this podcast. I mean, there's so much information. This is the thing, though. It's not information that's the problem. It's actually using that information wisely and actively. And I feel like this is where a lot of people get stuck too sometimes. So that's why I set a goal, and I'll listen to guys that I want to be like in the morning, in the afternoon, because they're my times where I'm not really required to be doing high level work, and I can just actually sit and take things in.
We're in the business, and I say this all the time, of, as coaches, we're in the business of implementation, not education. The information is literally all out there. Should you wish, should you have the aptitude and the desire, all the information ever from humanity is out there somewhere, but
Yeah.
it's the implementation that everyone struggles with. Not just people that haven't made it, people that, you know, are crushing it. It's all coming down to implementation. And I think
Yeah.
that's where, you know, the heart of coaching is having someone that gives a fuck about you and that can keep you accountable and
Mm.
remind you of the bird's eye view of your journey and the direction. But I honestly, I love that, because I think, and it kind of actually comes exactly back to what we initially started talking about, like the whole discipline piece, in that there's so much noise and we need to be able to separate the noise from the signal. And I think that when the value of being really aligned and intentional with the direction that you're going, i.e., you know, embracing discipline and having a fucking direction for your life, is it enables you to make these short-term sacrifices, i.e., the immediate dopamine release of fucking, you know, doom scrolling, versus the not so immediately pleasurable but long-term reward of, say, listening to a TED talk or a really interesting podcast, or, you know,
Mm.
something that fills your cup, that makes you think about how you can be a better person.
Yeah.
There's a really wonderful altruism that, you know, if your body is made of the things you eat and drink, you consume, then your mind
Yeah.
is made of the things we look and listen to, that we consume, you know,
Yeah.
metaphorically. And I think that's exactly what you've just said.
Yeah. I also try to focus as well. Um, I'll admit I don't do it enough, but I really do try. Um, like it's not just listening to big dogs, millionaires, CEOs, and like all of these crazy freaks that you'll see in the world, but it's also like I see that there's motivation all around you. For an example, I have construction sites out near our house, and you know these guys, they're working 12-hour days all day long. They're happy as fuck. They really are. You know, I talk to the cleaners downstairs and stuff like that. That, you know, I just know aren't as in a fortunate position as I am, but they're so happy, and they're so um, amazing to talk to, and you know they ask questions and stuff like this. So I try to look at that as well, because I know that sometimes for me, when I am hyper focused on fucking winning and grinding and all of this sort of stuff, you can sometimes, for me anyway, I can go. I need to step back sometimes and actually realize what is really important. And I definitely knew this from last year. So 2025, definitely the hardest year of my life, and it was definitely just hyper focused on so much work and stress, just because that's what the year turned out to be and that's what had to happen. But I did lose a little bit of, um, what would I say? Just like the real importance of why the fuck we're doing all of the shit that we're doing. And I don't want to lose that again. Not to say I lost it, but I want to make sure that I'm catching myself in these moments, because like it's important, I think, to balance that out from time to time. And it's important to understand what phase of life you're in, what phase you're in, to either go hard and knuckle down and lock in, and then actually come back to alignment and realize all the hard work you've done is it's for X, Y, and Z, and you can actually enjoy that so much more.
I think I had a friend ask me this the other day. I completely agree, by the way. And I had a friend ask me, who's going through a really, really rough time, basically like, how do you be happy? And what I distill from that, and what I believe to be true, is that the essence of happiness is in being, not existing, and being present, being grateful, and actually like embodying gratitude will take you further than anything else in life. Because if you can be grateful for, you know, you're never going to be grateful for anything if you can't be grateful for what you have now.
Yeah.
And it's not to say that, I think a lot of people mistake being grateful for what you have as being unambitious, or, you know, like, I hate the terminology, but like broke behavior or whatever, settling. It's not. It's appreciating, you
Mm.
know, where you are in life at the moment. And there's nothing wrong with wanting more for yourself, whatever more looks like. But yeah, I know exactly what you mean. It's the core of that, from what I feel, is gratitude and being present, as opposed to just kind of being swept up in life. And that's
Yeah.
exactly what you were talking about. You know, that you get to a point where you start to get wrapped up in everything, and you exist rather than you are, if that makes sense.
Yeah. That was definitely me for a large part of last year. Um, and yeah, it definitely just like didn't take a toll, but it just wasn't where I want to be again. Yeah, just last year, that was a lot of the year, but that was just a phase of life that I was in. High stress, a lot of shit going on. I just had to push through it. And I really do, I've said it so many times with my team, like last year was the most difficult year of my life, but in many ways it was the best. It was the best thing for me to go through so many challenges. And that's another thing, like you got to learn off those challenges. This is what we're talking about now, like making sure you're not so hyper fixated on the grind, on the wins, on the fucking, got to go get it all the time, and bringing yourself back into alignment. And for me, what helps is just looking around you. Like you're going to see reminders all the time. I have one just outside my balcony. So there's a building getting built, and there's an alley Mac that goes up and down delivering all of the tools and stuff for the workers. I used to be in that alley Mac 10 hours a day delivering plasterboards all day long. And for me, I look at that in the morning, and I can appreciate all the shit that I've been through to like kind of realign me and, just ground me a little bit more. And yeah, it's a good reminder.
I love that. I think that, talking about last year, you quite clearly in reflection pushed past your comfortable limit and actually understood exactly what you don't want, um, in terms of a balance, in terms of a way of having to operate as opposed to wanting to operate. But again, you could classify that as like categorize it, I guess, as like a failure. But again, that's needed to happen in order for you to live the way that you want to live this year. But I love that, and I think obviously you're very intentional, more so than 99.9% of people, about crafting an environment for you to grow. And I'm just curious about, obviously, the move to Dubai, because I know that we discussed it years ago, but I was just actually wondering about why the timeline, what the actual purpose of the move was for.
Yeah. Yeah. I think the timeline, it was time for a change from Bali. I was there for coming on to 3 years. And in that time frame that we were in Bali, Bali changed a lot. It's so chaotic now. It's so busy. And that kind of took away a lot of the enjoyment factor that we originally had moving over there. For the whole of last year, we were living in a villa, and there was just construction on all four sides, like all day long. Like I love Bali. It's always got a special place in my heart, but it just, it was just time. It was just time for a change, time for a shake up. I knew last year being such a stressful, crazy year, my environment definitely needed a shake up and a change. And yeah, we came over to Dubai. Obviously, know a lot of guys over here, and we're excited about the change. I think Dubai is amazing, to be honest. We've only been here for 8 weeks, but already, like, the environment and the change of scenery, the change of energy has been incredible for me personally, and for Tegan, and for everything else. Um, and that was probably the biggest thing that I picked up, because I didn't really know how bad my environment in Bali was until moving here, because for those 3 years, I couldn't actually wake up early and run early in the morning
Safely.
like I could here, or previous when I was living in Melbourne. And for me, this is such a big morning routine for me. This is what I love. We were speaking about it before, your alone time and stuff like that. Um, I tried to do it early in Bali, but before the sun rises, there's no street lights. There's dogs that are going to chase you, so it's just you just don't do it.
Yeah.
And I didn't realize how much of an effect this was actually having on me. And that's the thing, when you're so knee deep in shit, you don't actually realize the effect that everything else has. You're just trying to get through the shit.
Yeah.
And I think, man, coming over to Dubai, I was chatting to Tees about the first week, I felt like I was on drugs. I really did, because I had so much energy. I was clear. It was just a crazy change. Um, so yeah, man, we've been loving it, but I think it was just a natural next step, a natural progression, and a major environment shakeup that I personally needed.
No, I love that, and I know exactly what you mean about, you know, I think it speaks to the commitment you have to becoming better and
Oh,
your own self growth. Because the I've had the privilege of knowing you for quite a few years now, and the trajectory and the absolute difference in who you are compared to the first time. And by the way, the first time I met you, you were already a successful coach, but just the logarithmic kind of exponential growth that you've undergone in an environment that was you being knee deep in shit is just incredibly admirable. So I'm really excited for, you know, all the changes that are to come over the coming year. And I'm just, you know, grateful to have you here because we're in the same place for once. And I'm glad you're enjoying it. But I was just really curious, and I think we can start to take this into land. And I just want to. I know that I say this privately, but I publicly want to just say that I do really admire you, and I think that your story and the things that you stand for, your values, really do shine through. And I love the impact that you have. I mean, even like you were talking about getting up early, you inspired me to just kind of grab life by the balls and start, you know, just making something of that time in the morning. I know you get up like at like 4 a.m. So I'm slowly working my way back to that. I'm at about 4:30 now, but it's crazy because it just, you know, gives you a whole extra like 3 hours in the morning.
yeah,
Um,
it's peaceful.
but yeah, no, I really appreciate you, man. And one thing I like to do is there any books or like one piece of media, one book that you've really enjoyed recently or like has been really pivotal for you that my listeners or watchers might find benefit from?
Yeah, man. The best book that I've read recently was Patrick Bet David's um, 5 business strategies,
Mm-hmm.
or key 5 moves, I think it is. That I read that at a time where I was trying to scale a lot of things, so I took a lot out of it. I think that's important for books. Like, you gotta. This is for me anyway. If I'm not in a phase where this book is actually helping, I struggle to read.
Yeah,
But that one for me is probably been the most impactful one as of late.
I love that, and I completely agree. By the way, books come at you at a time where you need them, and I
Mm,
love dipping in and out of books because you need different parts of them at different times.
yeah.
I completely believe that, and I've borrowed a tradition from Diary of a CEO where I have previous guests leave a question, and it's not in order. Like these are all filmed non-chronologically. So the question that I think is well suited to you: what's the most valuable quote or moment that was a catalyst for change in your life?
Damn, good question. Most valuable quote or moment. Honestly, a quote that I've always loved, and I found this when I was really young, going through probably a lot of change, was every man has 2 lives, and the second begins when he realizes he only has one.
Hmm.
And for me, I can't remember who quoted that, but for me, I remember reading that for the first time, and I think it was when I was going through like all of the fucking chaos and struggle with rugby, and that just hit me so hard because I, it just, you read that and it's so fucking true, because some guys live a life and they're not even living until they realize, dude, it's all going to be done soon. What the fuck are you doing? And that
Hmm.
was for me.
I personally love that quote as well, and I can't remember who said it, but I think that's very quintessentially you.
Hmm.
And yeah, I just think I think you're the best, man. I really appreciate you coming on. And yeah, where can people find you? What
Uh,
channels? What's your
yeah,
handles?
just Instagram, Quick Conrad. I think my YouTube is just Conrad Quick. I don't really know. I'm not that big yet. But no, listen, man, I really appreciate your time, and this has been great. And yeah, I thank you for all the kind words and everything that you've helped with me as well. I even want to push you to editing my start of this into the end as a bit of a blooper, because I want people to see it. I think that's important, like, because this is like who I am. I need to step up and step out of that fear, and if I can portray that and show that, I think that's who I am at the end of the day. Like, I want to be as real as possible, and I think it'd be quite funny.
I will. I promise I will.
Yeah,
Conrad, you're the man. Thank you so much.
I appreciate it, bro. Great to chat.
See you later, brother.
See
Bye.
you, mate. 20 to 30, I would say 20 to 30 years old is really the opportunity where you need to harness a lot of discipline, mindset, leadership, because ultimately that is the foundation period of your life. That is the starting point of. Fuck, I'm nervous, man.
It's all
Can
right.
we
It's all good.
restart this?
Yeah, no, honestly, mate, what I was going to say is I can cut bits out, so it's all good.
I think you put me on the spot with the preempting the question.
Oh, really? Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
I actually did that to do the opposite, to give you a little bit of a breather to think about it. Okay, I can open slightly differently if you like.
No, this is good. I need to practice this.
Yeah, man, it's all good. Like you've got so much of value. Like I think
Yeah.
for me, yeah, man, I unbeknownst to you, I put you on my vision board last year for someone who really like does what they're going to say they're going to do, and follows through and leads by example. So that was why I wanted to speak to you. So
Yeah.
you've got it, man. You're all good.
Appreciate it, man. I just need a training run. That was it. Okay, we're good to rip. Let's go.
Yeah, sweet.
Let's
I'm
restart.
not going to bother restarting it because it's a fucking pain in the ass. But yeah, cool. 3, 2, 1.